Hello, friends. Welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. I'm your host, Heidi Ganal, a wife, mom of four, CU Regent, and the founder of Camp Bow Wow and the She Factor. With a passion for keeping the spirit of our state alive and well, I started this podcast to bring the people of Colorado together to celebrate the amazing state we call home. Come along on this journey with me as I travel across our old country roads in my vintage RV, interviewing folks that embody the true spirit of the Rocky Mountains. From the Front Range to the mile-high city to the Wild West of Southern Colorado, we'll celebrate the history, beauty, and Coloradans that make this place the colorful state it is. Each week, you'll meet people trailblazing the way for an even more colorful future for us all, making a huge difference along the way. Are you ready for a Rocky Mountain ride? Let's do this, Colorado. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. Wow, we've got some interesting conversation coming up with Kate, who works as an entrepreneur, but's been in manufacturing for a long time. Her company is called The Strategy Architect. Kate, welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado.
Thank you, Heidi. Lovely to be here. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm looking forward to our chat here today. And I'm excited to tell you all about my how I ended up in Colorado, what I love about Colorado, and what I do.
That's fantastic. And I know you worked for one of Colorado's most iconic brands, OtterBox, and that's part of your journey. But I think a lot of us have on our phones. I don't want to move my phone right now because it's part of the podcast, but I've got an OtterBox case on it. So that's exciting. And I know you have an interesting journey too about coming to Colorado. So let's dig right in.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to join OtterBox in its very early days back in about 2010. And I started with in their Irish office in Europe. So that was where their base was for Europe, the Middle East and Africa. So as you might tell from my accent, I'm Irish and have been living here 6 years, but haven't lost it. And it was a fantastic journey when they were really starting to grow and really grow not only in the US market, but really expand into the European market. So I started there with them and very quickly then also got exposure to their other offices in Hong Kong into the Asia Pacific market. And from there, within about 4 years working with them, I had the great opportunity to either take time to work in either the office in Hong Kong or the office in Fort Collins. And you might say, well, that's a big difference there in terms of, you know, your living style and your activities. And at the time, I actually thought Hong Kong might be where my pull was. I was more in my early 30s. It was kind of the lifestyle maybe I thought I wanted. And randomly enough, I was over in Hong Kong facilitating a strategic planning session. And I met my now husband, who also worked at OtterBox. We got to know each other that day. Then he flew home to Fort Collins. I flew home to Ireland. We stayed in touch and we decided to meet up in New York for a weekend to see if we liked each other. At this stage, he had no idea that I had this opportunity to move to Fort Collins. Or did I tell him, being an independent woman, I didn't want him to think it was because of him. I would choose Fort Collins. But yeah, that kind of swayed me. And I said, well, you know, it was going to be only for a year. So I said, oh, I'll give Fort Collins for a year over Hong Kong, and ended up moving here then. And I'm here 6 years. So whatever that is, minus 6. And so I've been here ever since. And then my husband and I then got married back in 2018. So what a kind of a journey of faith, you know, how you meet someone and everything just happens to align. Yeah, but the OtterBox story, really, OtterBox was more than a company I just worked for. It truly was, you know, where I met my husband, where I've met a lot of my very close friends. And it's such a great community as well here in Fort Collins of people and friendships. And it's so much more than just an organization. So I owe it a lot. And then in 2018, my husband and I had the very unique opportunity to go and travel the world. So we took some time off and traveled South America, Southeast Asia, parts of Europe, and also spent 2 months in a camper van up the northwest of the US. So then and then from there, I wanted to set up my own business, and that's kind of where I'm at today.
That's a fantastic story. And I'm very curious to hear your take on, you know, what Colorado's like compared to all those other countries you've been to, you know, lived in. What is it that you like about Colorado, and what makes it different than the rest of the world, basically?
Yeah, I think one of the things even to begin with about, the US, when I was moving, I thought, moving to Hong Kong versus the US and even Colorado, I just assumed, oh, it's going to be the exact same as Ireland. We speak the same language, we're similar, people from the US, Irish people. And kind of very naive of me, because when I moved here, very quickly you start to understand there's quite a lot of quite subtle differences between how, Irish people would interact, how American culture interacts, and even more so Colorado. And what I learned was that because of the weather and your seasons, that's how the lifestyle is set up in Colorado. And that's I think people who are attracted to Colorado also are attracted to that. So I had to get familiar with all of my hobbies were aligned to the Irish rain and weather. So it meant a lot of drinking tea, going to the pub, chatting with people. And when I moved to Colorado, I really had to change up all of that completely. Whilst I was very active, already, it became a lot more about the outdoors. It became a lot more about having specific hobbies that suited the culture. So that's really opened up my mind to everything that's available. And that's what I think is so huge about Colorado, the availability of what you can do with your time and the vastness of the nature and the countryside. It just really was so different than I expected. And so much, I've grown so much and learned so much from living here and been taken out of my bubble of Ireland. Like Colorado, I love it. As I said, the seasons, the activities that are aligned with those seasons, the beauty of the vast nature. And, obviously I love that patio happy hours in the sunshine. So yeah, everything about it. I really do love the lifestyle here.
That's definitely one of the perks of Colorado is you can take your dogs on the patios. You can basically, grab a meal, grab a beer, work for hours on the Starbucks patio if it's not too hot like right now. But I want to ask you a quick question. The Olympics are going on right now. So how do you deal with that? Do you root for Ireland or do you root for America?
Well, I think funnily enough, it's not even by country. I just kind of get I love the gymnastics in the Olympics. So obviously Ireland doesn't have anybody in that category. So in that case, then I will root for, the US. But I think it's more about, I like an individual for kind of maybe their flair more than anything else. But I think if the US were playing Ireland, maybe rugby, soccer, which isn't going to be probably a thing, then I'll of course have to root for Ireland over the US, but
That makes sense. I get it. So tell me a little bit about Kate, your company and what you're doing, and specifically around helping women in manufacturing. I know that's a topic that you've spoken about and been engaged with a bit. If you can tell us a little bit about that angle from your perspective.
Yeah, so the company is called The Strategy Architect, and I set that up in 2018. So I come from a line of entrepreneurs. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, both their parents were entrepreneurs. And funnily enough, when I was younger, I swore, no, I'm never going to work for myself. It's way too much work. Growing up in the family business and having to work in it since 8 years old, I swore, no way. But here I am, and I do love it. And I've kind of really enjoyed having that ownership. So as it relates to that as well, my company is all about helping organizations really thrive. So that's both in the for-profit sector, and obviously I have a long-standing background with manufacturing, consumer goods, and global markets. And then also I love working with the nonprofit sector and really helping them realize and taking kind of a lens of business to how they approach their nonprofit, and obviously using the right tools, because a nonprofit is set up in the way it is set up to be successful that way. What the Strategy Architect is all about is understanding and helping organizations really create clarity out of the chaos that's really inherent in kind of businesses and in organizations, and doing that through very quickly getting alignment around the strategy. And as I say, I'll quote Jim Collins, who's another Coloradoan from Boulder. So it's like, a good vision is all about 99% alignment, right? So, and 1% vision. So it's all important that you have, through facilitation, getting the right people in the room, agreeing and deciding on how they want to move forward, because there's no such thing as a perfect strategy. So it's all about getting that alignment, really being clear on where the organization wants to go. And once you have that clarity and you've then developed it into an integrated system where you have action plans to deliver that strategy, the next step really is talking about how do you then structure your organization to deliver that strategy. And that's where a lot of organizations don't take that next step. So how do you set up your people, your resources, to really deliver that strategy. So how do you design your processes, your structures, your reward systems, your metrics to deliver that strategy? So that's the operating model, and really those two, the strategy development and the organizational design, need to be done together to really drive the results that are needed. So with kind of doing that process, then I just recently, as I said, presented to Women in Manufacturing, which are a fantastic network. And really kind of supporting as I go through this as well, how do women be successful with strategic planning and vision? And that's, I spoke about that a little bit. As women, we sometimes tend to think that vision is a very lofty, kind of dream land, right? And we like to be more concrete or execution driven. But actually, in fact, when you think of a vision isn't a dream. A vision is all about like, what's not working with the current strategy? How do we generate new possibilities to resolve that? And then how do we communicate that in very inspiring ways? So really trying to help women to see that the importance of doing that work as a part of a leadership capability is really, really huge. And everyone can learn that capability. So, and again, supporting women in manufacturing to really be able to believe that about themselves and take that capability forward. And then, so that was the kind of tie into the women in manufacturing.
So when you were working with Otter and some of the work you do in manufacturing, what's your sense of women being involved in that segment of the industry? I mean, it's not something you think about like I think girls think about when they're growing up or when they're in college, like, yeah, I want to work for a company and, manage a line or figure out how to develop a product or manufacture a product or engineer a product. But we're getting more and more girls into STEM. And I think that'll become more prevalent. Is that something you're seeing, or where does that shift happen along the route from a young person deciding what they want to do to becoming, a very experienced professional in manufacturing?
Yeah, and I think the thing to understand as well about manufacturing, so you take OtterBox, for example, right? Yes, they're manufacturing, but they're a consumer goods company as well, right? So they have a lot of various, that's probably what they are foremost, right? So they have a lot of different departments. So whilst you could be working with a company who's manufacturing, there are multiple roles within that, right? So you've got marketing, you've got sales, right? But talking about the engineering or talking about those kind of more kind of the hardcore, like, as you said, referring back to the STEM, I think it's really being able to showcase at the earlier age when people are choosing, various different college degrees or university degrees, how they can, what's the future for roles like that. And yesterday I was talking as a part of the Women in Manufacturing, and they are looking to partner with universities to put some of those programs in place around how can we support students to really understand what are the careers that are available in advanced manufacturing, and how can we start to kind of connect that to the industry that exists out there today. So connecting students and connecting the university programs to actually real life industries. So I think that's a big part of how it's done, is connecting industry and universities to make sure that's working.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, I'm a regent at the University of Colorado, and I see a gap there. Like we're developing these programs and degree initiatives, and we're not tying like them to the actual jobs that we need to create for. And it takes a long time to develop these programs. So it might take 4 or 5 years to develop a degree program. By then, sometimes it's obsolete, what we're trying to teach them, right? Things are moving so fast. But one of the things that I love that you said is that, you can be involved in a manufacturing company and have any one of roles in HR, marketing, accounting, et cetera. But what I love about the idea of getting more girls involved in developing and engineering products is it's like an art, right? It's almost developing a science with an art, because you have to create this vision, or you have to develop this vision of what this product or service is and make it work out in the real world. And so it seems almost like a very entrepreneurial mindset you have to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think if you think of anybody who's like a design engineer or an industrial designer, which, there's a lot of those within manufacturing, they are both often very creative and very logical, right? So it's the art and the science. So they need to be able to see that creative vision and see what could be, and then really using the right methodology to then test develop prototypes and test those ideas before bringing them to market, when, before over investing in a product that may not actually have a market. You really be able to think about the science of how you test that in the marketplace before you actually bring it to full scale production. So again, yeah, I think anybody who's got that mindset, you can pull on both those sides of the brain. So I think it's a very interesting career in that.
So let's kind of wrap up with the last couple of questions I ask everybody on the program, which the first one is, when you went to visit Ireland recently and people asked why you love living in Colorado, is there anything unique or different than, it's obviously a very beautiful place and it's sunny, but is there any kind of like food that you like or anything about the culture that you really like that you told them about?
Yeah, so this is going to sound really cliche, but it is really true. So maybe cliches are there for a reason, but really and truly, I think, and this is maybe beyond even Colorado, this may be US culture even, I'm not too sure, I've only lived in Colorado, but people here are very optimistic and are very opportunity minded, really and truly, right? And I know that's a cliche about America, but it is true from my experience. Whereas in more the European mindset, it can be to more have more of a association with what's involved in going after that opportunity. Whereas here, I think people will just kind of go blindly after it because they believe in it so much, which is a really important thing, because if you don't, then it will never happen. So people are truly, whatever they can imagine can happen, I believe that they believe that. So that's a really different cultural shift. And that's what I've experienced in Colorado. And I don't know, I can't say if that's across the US or that's specific to Colorado.
Yeah, I do think it is specific to Colorado, or maybe it's on steroids here. Like it's just more about
Yes.
going big and reaching for those mountaintops and doing things that you never thought you could achieve anywhere else. But
Yeah.
That's great to hear, because we like to say that about Colorado and we think we're that way, but it's great to hear an outsider say, somebody who's been here 6 years, but somebody from another place say, yeah, that's their sense of it too. Kate, what's the most Colorado thing you've done since you've been here?
So this is kind of funny. So I know it sounds really silly, but I would kind of say camping. So before I moved here, my husband was like, have you gone camping? And I was like, oh yeah, I know how to camp. So I thought camping was camping at a music festival for 3 days. So that's what my idea was camping was. So when we started going camping here, my husband was like, Josh was like, oh, will you pack the food? And I'd be like, sure. So we'd land and there'd be nothing to really eat, because I really had never really camped as in what camping here is in Colorado. So now I'm a pro at it, but really, I know that sounds a little silly, but kind of really going out into the wilderness and spending a few days just kind of relaxing and having a fire and, all of that is very new to me, which might sound a little bit, silly, but really just coming from Ireland, we didn't have the weather to do any of that. So you just wouldn't have the experience with that. So
no, I don't think it sounds.
Maybe it's not the most Colorado thing, but yeah.
I think that's pretty Colorado. I just went glamping for the first time, which was pretty cool. I mean, you go there, it's all set up. It's beautiful. It's got lights. I don't know if I'd call it camping. That's why they call it glamping, I bet. But it's definitely a step down from having an RV or, that's really making fun of being
yeah.
But well, I'm glad you're getting to experience that and getting to enjoy some of the outdoors and camp. One of the
the other thing I would say that I have done, so I think it's very Colorado, is I have climbed, I think, 2 14ers. So, I think that's very Colorado. So yeah.
Yes, it is.
To know the word 14ers before.
It's probably the most common thing that people do when they come to Colorado. They want to do a Colorado thing, but it's also very hard. It's challenging. A lot of folks underestimate how much willpower and how technical it can be climbing up those mountains.
Yep.
Well,
absolutely.
That's a great answer too. And I appreciate you joining us today, Kate, and telling us a little bit about your journey here and what you love about our state. And, we're so glad that you're here, and we appreciate the work you do, and look forward to catching up with you soon and hearing more about your adventures here.
Thank you for joining us today on Heidi's Colorful Colorado. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And definitely follow me on Instagram to keep up with my latest adventures. In the meantime, happy trails from me, Heidi Ganahl.